For years, mainstream Democrats have tried to win by being moderate and conventional, to appeal to everyone. But what if trying to appeal to everyone is exactly how you lose them? We saw this recently with Andrew Cuomo losing to Zohran Mamdani. Mamdani was polling less than 1%, with no money and no name recognition. Then he exploded, overtaking Cuomo by double digits. Donald Trump did something similar in 2016. He broke through a crowded field of mainstream Republicans who, on paper, should have crushed him. So, how do political outsiders keep pulling this off? You see, there is actually a pattern behind how anything becomes popular. And to see it clearly, we need to leave politics for a moment.
And we are calling it iPhone.
That's right, an iPhone. The first iPhone became so popular that many assumed it was the first smartphone. It wasn't. Before the iPhone, BlackBerry dominated. At its peak, it controlled 50% of the US smartphone market. But mostly amongst business professionals, no smartphone had yet fully broken into the mass consumer market. Everyone believed at the time that regular consumers didn't want a complicated smartphone. They just want better calls, better battery lives, and better cameras. Even Apple bought into this conventional wisdom initially. They partnered with Motorola to create the Rocker, a phone with iTunes built in that could hold 100 songs. But that wasn't exciting to people, because Apple's own iPod could already hold thousands of songs, so it flopped immediately. See, the problem with conventional wisdom is that it only tells you what worked before. A better phone is fine, but it's also forgettable. If you want something to be popular, you need to capture people's attention. You need something unexpected. You need innovation. Steve Jobs understood this. He rejected the idea that regular consumers didn't want a smartphone. He believed they would if it felt like an innovation from the future. Looking at how computers evolved from desktops to laptops, the next step was obvious: a true pocket computer. So he rejected even more conventions. Everyone believed that a phone needed a physical keyboard, or at least a stylus. He chose neither. Just your fingers directly manipulating objects on a screen, something people had only seen in science fiction. It also had a real browser, not a stripped-down one that only worked on some websites. Later on, you could even install new apps, just like you would on a laptop. The iPhone was more than just a better phone. It was a pocket computer from the future. So why didn't BlackBerry do the same? Because its most profitable customers demanded physical keyboards and extra secure email. So every incentive pushed the company to keep refining this existing product. Why risk a radical change when the current business is still paying off? This is the innovator's dilemma. And Apple didn't have that problem. They were new to the phone market. They had nothing to lose. Within a few years, iPhone sales surpassed BlackBerries, and it became the first smartphone to fully break into the mass consumer market. Everybody wanted one. You see, the iPhone became popular because it rejected conventional wisdom and innovated. And that is the first ingredient of popularity: innovation. And it's what Mamdani had too. Mamdani wasn't popular at first. When he was polling at 1%, Cuomo was already at 33%. That made Cuomo comfortable, maybe too comfortable. So he just followed the mainstream playbook. He raised money from wealthy donors, bought TV ads, sent glossy mailers, and secured editorial endorsements. He emphasized his previous experience and centered his policies on what worked before: increase policing, reduce tax burden, and incentivize businesses to build more housing. In other words, he stuck to conventional wisdom.
Experience matters, and I think inexperience is dangerous in this case. Mr. Mamdani has had a staff of 5 people. You're now going to run a staff of 300,000 employees.
But Mamdani went a different route. He couldn't outspend Cuomo. His policies were incompatible with rich donors because he wanted to tax them more to fund public housing, public grocery stores, free childcare, free buses and rent freezes. So instead, he made viral social media posts and galvanized over 100,000 volunteers. They knocked down 3 million doors, especially in neighborhoods that establishment candidates ignored.
My opponents, who spend more time trying to convince the other to drop out than actually proposing their own policies, will speak only of the past, because that's all that they know. I am the sole candidate running with a vision for the future of this city.
Mamdani was ambitious and innovative, so he captured attention and quickly caught up to Cuomo. And when Cuomo realized it, it was too late. He had the same innovator's dilemma as BlackBerry. Locked in with his wealthy donors, he couldn't pivot to messages like taxing the rich, even if he wanted to. So on election day, Mamdani won by a wide margin. Cuomo had outspent him by tens of millions, but Mamdani generated so much attention that voter turnout reached its highest in decades. Donald Trump was also unexpected, but in very different ways.
It's time to drain the swamp in Washington, D.C.
He violated nearly every convention of electability. He ignored decorum, bypassed party leadership, and spoke in ways that shocked the media. Yet, he got billions of dollars worth of free coverage, while mainstream candidates paid for ads. Now, innovation doesn't guarantee popularity every time. After all, Trump lost to Biden in 2020. But it certainly captures attention much better than convention. It's almost as if we're naturally drawn to new things. But why is that? Neuroscientists describe our brain as a prediction machine. It constantly builds internal models of the world to help you move safely and effectively, like predicting a car's trajectory to avoid collision or predicting your partner's words to understand their needs. In order for those models to stay accurate, the brain has to notice when they are wrong. That's why something unexpected instantly grabs your attention. It shows us which parts of the model can be improved. But innovation matters more than just human behaviors. It's foundational to how every species survives and evolves. And there's a really cool way to understand this. Biologists call it fitness landscape. Imagine a map of hills and valleys, where every point represents a different survival strategy. The hills are high fitness strategies, and the valleys are low fitness ones. And species naturally evolve towards the highest peak. When the environment is stable, the same hill remains the best place to be. That's what we call conventional wisdom. But the world isn't static. Valleys can rise into hills, and hills can shrink into valleys. Convention becomes outdated. The peppered moth in England is a perfect example. For centuries, light-colored moths blended into the pale forests to hide from predators. Then, industrial pollution darkened the trees. Suddenly, the old strategy became deadly, until a dark-colored mutation became a new peak, an innovative way to hide. Within decades, the entire population shifted to darker colors. See, what worked in the past wasn't just boring, it was dangerous. And innovation was the only way to survive. Likewise, the rocker was a better version of old phones, but it was a hill that was already shrinking. The iPhone climbed a different hill, a pocket computer for a world that was becoming more mobile. Cuomo had policies that worked in the past, but as the cost of living exploded and jobs disappeared, these conventions felt increasingly out of touch. Meanwhile, Mamdani worked as a foreclosure prevention counselor, so he instinctively understood that affordability was the true issue, even though the polls didn't show it.
That had not necessarily registered yet as strongly in the polls, not because it wasn't the grinding crisis of working people's lives in the city, but because for so many years, they had learned through experience to disconnect cost from politics, essentially. That politics could not really do anything for the prices they were paying to get by.
Mamdani's campaign captured our attention, not just because it was new and unexpected, but also because it pointed to an exciting future in a world that was decaying. Now, you might ask, what about other anti-establishment outsiders like Bernie Sanders? His 99% versus 1% message was certainly innovative, and the Republican Party had such candidates too. So why did they lose? The difference here is that while innovation is good at capturing attention, it alone isn't enough to keep the attention. There needs to be something else. You see, as innovative as the iPhone's touchscreen was, it wasn't the only phone that had it. There were the Palm Pilot, the LG Prada, and even Apple's own Newton message pad. But here's the problem. They were difficult to use. Some of them relied on a stylus, which was cumbersome and easy to lose. Others did support finger input, but with awkward and buggy interfaces that just made people miss physical buttons. So only business professionals and tech enthusiasts ended up buying them because they were willing to tolerate bugginess just to try something new. These innovations weren't accessible enough for the regular consumers. They weren't the right features. On the other hand, the iPhone's multi-finger gesture, pinch, swipe, scroll, just felt natural. Its predictive keyboard also made typing on glass easier. Perhaps more importantly, Apple designed an entire operating system just for the touchscreen. No complicated file system, no nested menus, just a simple app-based interface suitable for small screens. Because Apple was never interested in innovation for its own sake.
You've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it.
The Macintosh didn't succeed in the 80s just because it innovated with a mouse and Windows. Those elements also worked together to replace command lines with intuitive graphics. And the iPod didn't dominate the 2000s just because it held more songs. It also worked seamlessly with iTunes, so you could upload music with ease. These products didn't just innovate, they made innovation accessible. And that is the second ingredient of popularity. Innovation grabs attention, accessibility keeps it. The same pattern works in politics. Now, it's easy to generate a long list of bold, innovative policies. Some voters might even respond to them at first. But in order to keep those voters, those ideas have to feel accessible, like something you could actually experience in your daily life. And Mamdani excelled at that. Instead of abstract arguments about socialism versus capitalism, he talked about rent rising faster than wages, utility bills going up, bus fares cutting into paychecks, and families choosing between healthcare and food. And for each of those problems, he had a specific policy solution explained in plain language. Even when opponents tries to reduce him to ideological labels like communist, anti-Semitic, terrorist sympathizers, he wouldn't take the bait. He responded honestly, then immediately went back to the day-to-day reality of New Yorkers.
So we were telling people, we want to tell the stories of the New Yorkers who are often forgotten. How you doing, brother? To work while everyone else gets to sleep.
That was my shift, like the hunger strike.
Yeah.
Night shift.
Yeah, night shift. Without the night shift, there is no morning oftentimes.
It's all New York City.
Yeah.
Just like the iPhone, Mamdani's popularity wasn't just due to his innovative policies. He was also able to translate them into something that regular people could relate to. Being accessible was one of Trump's strengths too. He sounded more like a regular person than a career politician. So despite him being a billionaire, many voters still found him relatable. Now, Bernie Sanders is a tricky case. He had relatable policies like $15 minimum wage and Medicare for all, but he framed them through big systemic language, like a political revolution against the 1%. That framing did reflect reality, but it was still several steps away from people's daily lives. There was also a difference in tone. Bernie came across as a crusader, principled but lecturing. Mamdani was principled too, but he was also approachable, someone you could just hang out with. Of course, framing and tone weren't the only reason that Bernie lost. Media bias and party infighting all played a part. But all of that points to something deeper. Bernie Sanders may have simply been too early. You see, even when something is both innovative and accessible, it can still take a long time for most people to fully adopt it. And there's another scientific reason for that, called diffusion of innovation. Humans evolved to seek out new things, but we also evolved to avoid risk. Let's visualize this again in a fitness landscape. Imagine two hills, one conventional hill, a strategy that has worked for a long time. The other is an innovative hill, something new and unproven. The problem is, no one can see the future. That innovative hill might grow taller, it might stay the same, or it might collapse into a valley. This makes evolutionary sense. Exploring new territories could mean more food, but it could also mean more predators. So even when the old hill is shrinking, leaving is risky, and it's often costly too. So it's reasonable to be cautious of new things, but not everyone has the same risk tolerance. At one extreme, you have enthusiasts. They're the most risk tolerant. They'll try a new thing just because it's new. At the other extreme, you have the majority. They are more cautious. They won't adopt a new thing until it's proven to work. And that proof comes from a third group, visionaries. Visionaries are kinda in between the other two. What makes them special is that they are opinion leaders. So after they have adopted a new thing, the majority will feel much safer to follow. And Apple is a master at recruiting visionaries. Over the years, it has built up a network of tastemakers, bloggers, and celebrities who worship its design philosophy. Their ads reflected this strategy too. They rarely focused on specs or pricing. Instead, they framed their products as status symbols and lifestyle trends that often attracted visionaries. Perhaps the biggest move was the App Store. By letting third parties build on the iPhone, Apple turned millions of developers into proof generators. Every great app made the iPhone more valuable. Mamdani also had an army of visionaries. These were the influencers who shared his social media posts and DSA organizers and volunteers who knocked on doors and vouched for him face to face.
People would develop this relationship to Zohran and the message through their phones. But if it lived exclusively in that phone, it just becomes another creator that or influencer that you get excited when they pop up and all the other things the algorithm is pushing towards you. But then you get a knock on the door from somebody bringing you the same message, asking you about your own life, talking to you about what you can do to build this campaign, and it creates a movement around it, basically.
So if the Democratic Party, or really any party, wants to start winning more consistently, they need to rethink their conventional strategies. The world has changed. Popularity isn't about pleasing everyone. It's about showing people a future they're excited about, a future that feels achievable, and a future they will advocate for. In other words, innovation, accessibility, and visionaries. But just because something becomes popular doesn't mean it will last or that it's good for us. History is full of moments where people rallied around popular ideas only to feel years later that those ideas were softened, delayed, or abandoned altogether once power was secured. But it's also full of movements that keep turning vision into reality year after year until they transform an entire society. If you're curious about how that kind of lasting change is built, check out my previous video on the hidden principles that sustained movements in the past. And if you want to go deeper, this same tension between innovation and convention shows up in another video on how to cultivate resilient individuals, organizations, and societies in a chaotic world. Lastly, if you'd like to support my work and help my team rely less on ads and sponsors, there's a Patreon link in the description. No pressure. Thank you for being here.